Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic for you today. Let's do it. What's a creepy real-life story that still gives you chills to this day? Please remember to like, share, hype, and subscribe.
The case of septic tank Sam. In 1975, an Alberta couple wanted a pump for their septic tank, and they decided to take the pump from the tank in their old abandoned farm instead of buying a new one. In doing so, they discovered a dead body that was thrown there. The victim's story is very horrific. He was tortured and mutilated before he was shot, then thrown in the septic tank of an abandoned farm, hoping that the crime would never be discovered. The victim was identified in 2021, but the murder is yet to be solved. My aunt woke up in the middle of the night and noticed the red light on her TV was off. She rolled over in bed and saw the light turn back on. When she woke up the next morning, her TV was gone, along with a ton of other stuff. In my own personal life, my childhood best friend's alcoholic grandpa killed and dismembered his also alcoholic girlfriend. If I recall correctly, she was missing for around a year, but her family was used to her disappearing like that due to her addiction, so nobody reported her missing. Well, Grandpa died, and my childhood friend was supposed to get his car that was parked about a block away from his house, but her aunt claimed it instead, and my friend was pissed and decided to call and get the car towed, being petty, so her aunt wouldn't be able to get the car out without going through a lengthy process since the car was in Grandpa's name still. One of the dudes working at the tow company was friends with the aunt and knew her dad had died. It was his car, so he called her to give her a chance to get the car first. She went to pick it up and noticed 2 or 3 totes in the back seat, and for whatever reason, she started opening them up right there and saw they were full of different sized vacuum-sealed bags. She couldn't tell what was in the bags because they were made with that material that gives it a frosted look, and could only tell that whatever was in them was in dark color. She decided to open up one of the bags and was immediately hit with an extremely foul odor, and at first she thought it was deer meat or something that had gone bad, but when she finally actually looked inside the bag, it was a human hand. She ended up calling the cops, and they took all the totes away and the car, so the aunt or my friend didn't even end up with it, and nothing was ever said or done because the dude was dead. The same childhood friend of mine ended up being involved with the murder herself some years later. She had gotten addicted to meth, and one night was with 2 other addicts who were a couple. My friend was driving, girlfriend was in the passenger, and the boyfriend in the back. They decided they needed to rob somebody so they could get high, and when they pulled up, the dude hopped in the back seat, and pretty much immediately the boyfriend tried to rob him, but the dude pulled out a gun, shot the guy in the head, and then ran. My friend and the girlfriend then drove to the hospital instead of getting help. They just pushed him out of the car and fled. It took the cops a few months to figure out who both the women were, but they eventually found out, and both were sentenced to prison. My friend did like 5 to 7 years, and has been out for a few years now. The Valley of Headless Men in Nahanni Valley, Canada. A remote wilderness area famous for a series of unexplained disappearances and headless corpses found between 1905 and the mid-20th century. Local natives in that area would tell hunters and gold diggers not to go to that part of the valley, as everyone who does never makes it back. I don't remember the name of the lake, but it was slowly filling up with CO2 over decades, and one day an earthquake happened, shifting the water just enough to undissolve all the CO2, and it slowly crept down the mountain into the village, creating a wave of invisible, undetectable death. Everyone in the village, animals, humans, birds, died where they stood, without even knowing why. A friend of mine in high school was murdered by someone with their car. He was walking home wasted after a party. The autopsy showed injuries that were consistent with the car slowly crushing him, like they were driving under 10 miles per hour. The autopsy also showed he was run over twice, just as slowly. It didn't kill him instantly. He crawled to the side of the road and probably lived for hours in excruciating pain. Not only did they never find out who did it, they never had a single suspect. It happened deep in his neighborhood, so it's not likely that it was some stranger from the highway. So whoever did it could be a neighbor that's still living there. I was 16 at the time and had barely just got my license. I had a friend in school, a girl who most considered boy crazy, but to my disappointment, she wasn't interested in me. Typical popular good-looking girl who was into jocks, and I was the nerdiest kid in the class, but we were very close, and she would tell me all her struggles, and then delete the messages, mostly because the guys she liked were very possessive. In the dead of night in the winter, I got a call from her. This was very unusual, mostly the calling, but also it was a school night and it was very late. She was speaking in a hushed, shaking voice, and asked me to come pick her up. I knew something was wrong, but she had to hang up after giving me the address. This was before GPS, and I barely knew how to get to school, but I printed out a MapQuest route to her boyfriend's house in a different city. She asked me to bring her clothes, specifically shirt underwear and some sweats. I pushed my car out of the driveway and coasted until I was sure my parents couldn't hear it. I got to the house and she came out, obviously trying to make a little noise as possible. She was naked, makeup smeared from crying, hair matted. She got in the car, told me to take off, and she put the clothes on. I asked her what happened, and all she would say, without breaking down, is she went to her boyfriend's birthday party and woke up like this with no memory. She woke up in the middle of the room, with all his friends and him also naked. I took her home and snuck back into the house 2 hours before I had to get up for school. We never spoke of it again. I didn't think much of it then, but 17 years later, I have my own kids and a daughter who's the light of my world, and I can't tell this story without crying. She's been married now, and with kids, to a seemingly good guy for a decade. We don't talk anymore, but I still check her Facebook from time to time, and hope she's okay now.
A long waistline ago, mid-90s, I was a countryside ranger on the West Coast, and one day I was carrying out a Phase 1 habitat survey when I came across a camp setup in a remote, unmanaged wood. Tent, stove, kettle, sleeping bag and tent, some cooking equipment, rucksack and a pair of walking boots at the tent entrance with a sock in each boot. The problem was it had been there for years. The tent was ripped and weathered. Pots full of pine needles and moss had covered most of the equipment. The rucksack and a couple items of clothing in it, and strangely, a flute. Nothing in the rucksack, and anything to ID anyone. We carried out a search of the area with police, dogs, locals, and mountain rescue. Weeks later, not a thing, nothing. Absolutely no trace of anything or anyone. We'll never know what happened to that person that felt compelled to leave their camp and leave their flute behind. The death of Hisashi Oichi. He was working at a nuclear plant and due to shoddy working conditions was involved in a criticality incident. He was hit with, I believe, the most radiation any human has ever been hit with without instantly dying. For 81 days, a cabal of the best doctors in the world tried to keep him alive as his body shut down. The descriptions of what he was going through and what was physically happening to him make it clear to me that sometimes saving a life isn't worth it. It's a tragic story of a young man suffering one of the worst fates possible. My grandparents are Dutch immigrants in New Zealand, and in the 1970s they had a caravan that took out camping to a rural part of the North Island for a little family fun camping trip. My mom and siblings would have been 10 or younger at the time. They were way out in the middle of nowhere near a lake in the rainforest, and after the kids had gone to sleep, my grandparents had stayed awake a little while just reading, etc., having a cup of tea. They started hearing strange noises like footsteps outside and twigs breaking, maybe a hushed voice, but thought they were getting paranoid. They were getting a bit freaked out at this point, but assumed it was nothing and they'd be safe. Grandpa told me he couldn't go to sleep and suddenly heard a definite footstep right outside the caravan door. He peeked out the window of the caravan, and it was completely pitch black and no moonlight whatsoever, but he could see the glowing cigarette of what must have been a pretty tall man standing right at the door of the caravan. He could still hear other footsteps too, even though whichever was smoking the cigarette outside the door was standing dead still. He told me he'd never been so scared in his life, but had to do something because he had his wife and 4 little kids sleeping inside the caravan. And so he grabbed his butcher's knife. He was a butcher by profession. Lord knows why he had it on a family camping trip. Opened the door to confront or yell or do whatever he could to scare the people away. But when he opened the door, he saw no one and heard no noise. He thought he was going crazy, but he saw the cigarette butt on the ground outside the door, freshly finished. He got into the car straight away. He had everything ready to go, luckily, because he'd already planned on beginning driving early the next morning anyways, and drove everyone away and found somewhere else near a town to stay instead. The story freaks me out every time I think about it. When I was 13, the older boys my bestie and I had become friends with used to take us out on forested, unpaved roads. We lived in the suburbs, and tell us that if we kept driving, we'd end up going through a Ku Klux Klan camp. They would tell us that we'd probably be okay because we're white, but if we kept driving further, we'd end up at some biker place, and that's somewhere we should never go alone, ever. Bad things happen to girls there, really bad things. We thought they were just trying to scare us, but there was a seriousness in one of the guys' voices that made me think he was telling the truth. They called it Piggy's Palace. Fast forward 30 years, and that spot was found to be where a serial killer had been feeding his victims to pigs on his farm. Robert Pickton was one of a few brothers, and most likely the patsy for many deaths, but he loved to torture any women who were left behind, passed out, passed around, drugged up, etc. He was also sent to downtown Vancouver to bring women back to the farm for others and for himself. My mother worked in a prison with the VP wing when I was younger. She worked in the education department rather than as a guard. I remember her stopping my sister and I from having our hair in ponytails for a while, making us wear it down, and never really got why. As a tomboy, I hated it, so she let me have it cut, and that was that. When I was older, she explained that a new inmate was in for violating his 5-year-old daughter with a beer bottle, which broke. He let her bleed out, and then rolled her into a carpet and put her in the attic. Ugh. He was discovered trying to move the body. He liked to talk about his girl sometimes, how pretty she was, and how he loved the back of her neck, how little girls with their hair up was how delicate it was, how he could grab it, etc. She couldn't cope seeing us with our hair like that. I've worked in CPS. There are people living among us who have no empathy, no human connection. They're empty vessels that look like humans but have no real soul. And their deepest desire is to hurt, torture, and destroy children. They're highly intelligent and are always just biding their time until they think they can strike without being detected. Writing this as I'm looking at the family tree of a girl whose father was her own grandfather. My mother's college roommate was a sleepwalker. One night a friend, coming home late from a date, found her roaming the halls in their dorm and carefully got her back up their room. As they got her back to bed, they saw the soles of her feet were filthy, as if she had been walking outside barefoot for hours. Still freaks me out thinking what could have happened to her. This girl I knew wasn't answering her phone when I was calling or texting. Finally she does, and is said she is locked in some guy's dorm room in UMBC. I get on the phone with the guy and we start arguing. I say I'm on my way to deal with it, and when I get to campus, she tells me she got out and I pick her up. I want to confront him, and she says that he seems really creepy. So fast forward a couple of days later, and this guy finds my AOL Messenger, yes, AIM, and is threatening me and showing me he knows my whole legal name and address. But also, like, this was 2005, so stuff like that wasn't as easy to find on the internet. He threatens to kill me and the girl I called his bluff and let him know I'd be ready to meet up with him at any time because I figured he was a keyboard warrior. A few weeks later, he went on a date with someone from MySpace and brutally killed and art her. He mutilated her body so it would be hard to identify her.
He ended up pleading guilty to spare himself the death penalty. John Gomer is his name, and they called him the MySpace Killer. The case of Lacey Fletcher. Her parents, 66 years old, found their 36-year-old daughter dead on the couch. Lacey had severe agoraphobia and couldn't leave her couch for 12 years, so since she was 24. Her parents neglected her severely, didn't take care of her, and didn't get her help. When she was found, she had melted into the couch, and her skin had atrophied to the couch leather while she was alive. She was covered in excrement, and insects were eating away at her body, also while she was alive. Lacey tried to save herself by eating her own excrement and the couch foam, but she was unable to get up from the couch for 12 years, and her parents refused to take care of her, which eventually led to her death. So Lacey Fletcher died from severe neglect from her own parents. Hinterkaifeck. Over a period of days, odd things were happening around a farm, including footprints in the snow leading to the farmhouse, but not away from it. The maid quit abruptly, citing strange noises and fearing the place was haunted. Her decision saved her life. On the first night of the new maid's job, a man believed to have been hiding in the attic of the house descended into the main quarters and systematically murdered the family in an outbuilding one by one. Several initially survived and had to watch their family members die in front of them. When the bodies were found, one of the youngest girls had pulled out tufts of her own hair as she was dying from the sheer horror of the experience. The individual then proceeded to live in the house for several days, sleeping in the beds, eating the food, and looking after the animals before eventually leaving soon before the bodies were discovered. They have never been found.
I mean, at this point now, after 5 years, I've read about the Hinterkaifeck murders 30 or 40 times, and those little tidbits that may not have been in the previous iterations, and I can only imagine the technology available at the time to solve a crime like that after time. Whoever did it got away with it. If I'm guessing, I think it would be somehow someone that was regionally local. I don't know about drifters in Germany or anything like that, but it seems like they knew the people. I don't know. Any thoughts on that?
2 stories. 1. I used to ride my bike to the other side of my neighborhood to play with my buddy Blake. One day I was riding down the hill toward his house and he jumped out from behind a power pole and startled me enough that I lost control of my bike and crashed on the street, leaving my forearm skinned about 6 inches away. He kinda blamed me and I didn't really think anything of it, thinking he was somehow right. Later on, he had gotten some firecrackers, M80s, and we played with them. Blew up a model jet and stuff. He mentioned something about using them to blow up frogs, and I didn't take him seriously. He ended up joining the Marine Corps, but didn't re-enlist. I didn't think much more about him. Then one day, my mom is reading the paper and asked me what my friend's name was because such and such Blakely such and such was arrested for the murder of his estranged girlfriend and her unborn child. He had driven her car off the highway onto a dirt road, slit her throat, and had containers of fuel in the car that he set on fire to hide the evidence. I don't remember the particulars of his arrest, but apparently he was walking along the road away from the site when a police officer stopped and questioned him. I don't know if he confessed then or under interrogation, but he confessed. He was convicted of double murder. My good friend, as a kid, turned out to be a murderer, and I saw the signs but didn't know it at the time. 2. I was stationed in Iwakuni, Japan, and was the safety NCO for our unit. I was passing friends with a guy embarking on a Thursday. We went out drinking as a group. Saturday, the guy and 2 buddies decided to rent a canoe and went out into the ocean for some fun. At some point, the boat capsized and the 3 men were stuck holding onto the overturned craft and decided that the strongest swimmer should try to swim to shore to get help, and the other 2 were going to stay put until help arrived. The swimmer got to shore, and a second guy had abandoned the canoe and was picked up by fishermen alive. My passing friend didn't make it. He was found after a manhunt down the coast. He had died of hypothermia. This was maybe May, and I seem to remember the water was in the 60s Fahrenheit.
Since I was the safety NCO, I had to fill out the paperwork for his death. I learned that even in 70-degree water, you can die of hypothermia in just a few hours. This event, along with unrelated nightmares I had as a child of being in open water with giant shapeless creatures coming to get me, and I would wake up as jaws were closing around me, gave me thalassophobia, fear of open water. So, I had to fill out the incident report for the death of a guy I had been out drinking with just 2 days prior. This happened to me about 10 years ago. My best friend growing up, Steve, had died unexpectedly. We had grown apart, but had recently started speaking after many years. Steve hated, and I'm not using the word hated here, technology. No computer. No cell phone. Nothing but a television with an antenna and a landline for good old Steve. I was away on business when I got word that he had died. Since we never married, and was pretty much a son of a bitch, and has been estranged from his family for about 10 years, I saw his sister and brother yesterday. His body was undiscovered for a couple of weeks. That part haunts me to this day. Shortly after returning home, I left again on a trip for a course that was being given in Texas. Sitting in class, my phone on vibrate mode buzzed. It was Steve. A cold flush swept over me. I was sitting in class, so I didn't answer. I called later that day, and as expected, there was no answer. I'm retired now, but at the time I worked for a satellite telecommunications company. Part of my job was managing back-office telecom equipment, so I understood call routing over SS7 networks and routing tables. If the number was reassigned to someone else, they perhaps misdialed my number or dialed in a redial code into his old Pot's desk set. It creeped me out. I don't believe in ghosts or spirits or any of that hokum, but the weirdness and randomness of that incident makes me think about rejigging some of my assumptions. Totally unexplainable and confusing to me to this day. I want to preface this by being very clear that I am not superstitious, and I am not someone who is easily frightened and lets my mind play tricks on me. 15 years old, I was at my dad's house visiting him for spring break. I was sleeping in my room and woke up to a sound that I can only describe as someone exhaling very aggressively. And it started far away and got really close and loud. It's like if someone threw an invisible ball at me, and it was the sounds of someone exhaling really hard, and when it hit me, it was right in my ear very loud and blew my hair to the side. Obviously, it woke me up, and I looked across the room to see my window curtains blowing violently from the window being open. I thought to myself, oh shit, I thought I closed that. I hurried over to the window, as it was still blowing the curtains, and it was loud too. You could hear the wind whistling through the screen. Pushed the curtains aside to close it, and all of a sudden everything went quiet and still, as I realized the window was already closed. I sat there and stared at the window for probably 10 minutes trying to understand what just happened. Then I walked back over to my bed and laid there all night, literally until the sun came up, trying to figure out what could have caused that. Never was able to come up with anything. The hatchet case. On the morning of June 5, 1983, Bill Hughes arrived at a semi-rural home in Chino Hills, California, where his 11-year-old son, Christopher, had spent the night. Inside, he found Douglas and Peggy Ryan, their 10-year-old daughter, Jessica, and his own son dead. They had been chopped with a hatchet, sliced with a knife, and stabbed with an ice pick. Josh Ryan, the 8-year-old son of Douglas and Peggy, had survived. His throat had been cut. Mrs. Ryan's purse was in plain sight on the kitchen counter, but no money had been taken. The family station wagon was gone. It was discovered several days later in Long Beach, California, about 50 miles southwest of Chino Hills. They caught the guy. I was just getting over COVID, the OG version, in August 2020. It damn near killed me. I woke up in the middle of the night and swore I saw someone standing next to my bed. I figured that it was a trick of the light, so I stood up to change perspective. He was still there. I saw him so clearly. He had short hair and was turned 3/4 of the way away from me.
He was wearing a plaid shirt untucked into jeans. Of course, I started screaming and pulled the cord on the ceiling fan. As soon as the light came on, he disappeared. I don't know if it was a COVID hallucination or what, but I've never experienced anything that real before that wasn't actually real. I later told a neurologist about it because I was just worried about possible brain damage, and he just looked at me for a long time, then changed the subject. I was living in a 200-year-old house at the time, so maybe I saw a ghost, who the hell knows, but it scared the crap out of me. It's only a story for me because I don't remember any of it, but years ago I had episodes of sleep terrors. My family told me that sometimes I screamed so loud that I woke up the neighbors. Well, one day I woke up to my boyfriend at the time screaming at me to wake up while rustling to me to the ground. The balcony doors were open and I was halfway out. After we both calmed down a bit, he started crying. From his point of view, it was something straight out of a horror movie. He got jolted awake by me jumping up on my feet, silent with a blank expression on my face. Then I started panting, and then I screamed like a banshee. I bolted for the balcony door, opened them, and put my leg over the railing, all while still screaming. He caught me in the last second. In his words, he never heard anything like this before, and hopes he never will again. It took me years after that to build up courage for living on my own. I'm terrified that one day I will wake up on my way to the ground. I was about 7 or 8 years old and went with my family to this man-made lake family park place in South Georgia. Basically a big dugout pond that the owner put a bunch of beach sand and palm trees around and charged admission for people to come, park their cars, grill, and swim for the day. Also, had a big unsafe as hell water slide that kids got hurt on. So, where my family would park was in front of this little island that was a clump of sand about 30 yards off the shoreline. I was not the best swimmer, but the depth was just above my head, so I could bob up and down and bounce out to the island. Bouncing out to that little island one day, we were there, my foot came down onto what felt like a face, felt what was a nose on my toe. The thing I remember is the feeling of hair flowing between my toes. That feeling of fine hair waving in water. I freaked out and for the longest time just sat on the shore. Was a little kid and did not think anything about it. I can still remember the scared parents going around yelling the kid's name, asking if anyone had seen this little boy. They pulled his body from under the water right in front of that island. I'm 47 now and can still remember the feeling of that hair between my toes. My school had a mandatory uniform policy and had a school shop with a changing room in it. The guy who tended the shop was arrested for being a pedo and allegedly had a hidden camera in that changing room. I usually bought my clothes without trying them on because male sizes tended to be consistent, and as I grew I'd just +1 to whatever the current size was, and it worked. What terrifies me is all the girls I went to class with ever since I was 2, that from early childhood to the beginning of adulthood changed in that changing room trying new clothes on. How many people that I know ended up on some creep's computer, and even worse, in his twisted mind? The same guy who was so chill when I would buy a pen or an eraser.